Gladiator 2 is now out. Is it any good? Let's talk about it.
Your name will be forgotten!
To restore order, I must have power.
After his home is conquered by the emperors who now lead Rome, Lucius is forced to enter the Colosseum and must find strength to return the glory of Rome to its people. Ridley Scott is back, and let's just say that he is back with a vengeance because his last couple of films weren't that good for me, except for like The Last Duel. I was a huge fan of The Last Duel, and I loved how he played like the story, like 3 different times he played the story from a different perspective. I think I saw that one like 3 times in theaters. I do own it. I think that movie is fantastic. Of course, he had The Martian, but some of his last movies, like the 2 last movies he did, House of Gucci was supposed to be, a huge Oscars movie. Lady Gaga was supposed to like win Oscars for that. Everyone thought it was going to be amazing, but it was a huge dud. I still haven't seen it. I still need to watch it, but I've heard bad things. I've seen some clips too of Jared Leto. It's not pretty. And Napoleon was his last movie, and it was something that I was really excited for. I did a trailer reaction for it. I really enjoyed that trailer, but I was bored out of my mind from that movie, and I do love Ridley Scott. I love me some Ridley Scott. That movie was boring. I couldn't even get myself to sit down and watch the new director's cut, 3-hour director's cut, or 4-hour director's cut on Apple TV. I did not like that movie, and it wasn't even the performances. It was just the really boring, slow-paced movie. But with Gladiator 2, I feel like he is back to his true form of just making a full pedal-to-the-metal action movie. I've always said, Ridley Scott, he really does well at making either a science fiction movie, which he has a lot of famous sci-fi movies, or, an action film. He's got some great action movies, and this is, him back into his zone, and I'm finally happy to say that he's back in it, and he's doing it so well with Gladiator 2. And before we do talk about Gladiator 2, I do want to talk about the famous original Gladiator. I watched it for the first time back in 2022, so just a couple years ago, and I thought it was good. Not great, but I'm delusional sometimes, so I rewatched it this year, and now it's, one of my favorite movies of all time. My perspective on it really changed for the better. I'm not really sure why that is. Maybe I was just, on my phone half the time when I first watched in 2022. Now I pay attention to those movies that I watch now. I've rewatched it 3 times this year, and it hits harder each and every time. I wanted to be fair in this review, so I'm trying to not compare them too much. I don't think anyone should really compare them when talking about them because they're both, I think, their own movies. And, some people are asking for this sequel to be better than the first one. Some people are expecting that. And I'm kind of confused by that because how would a masterpiece, be taken down by a sequel? Usually sequels aren't as good as their first. And, I would have never expected Gladiator 2 to be better than the first one because I hold the first one to a very high regard. So I was coming into Gladiator 2 with some huge expectations, I'd say, but I still left those at the door. The first Gladiator, one of my favorite films of all time now. And so Gladiator 2, I left the theater, and I can say I loved this film so much. I really wasn't expecting to like it this much off of some of the harsh reactions. Still was like a 70% Rotten Tomatoes. But I really just felt so floored by this movie, and I must have leaned in my seat like over 10 times because I was feeling it. I felt transported back into this world. And my theater, I went to Regal, and I got this cool kind of popcorn bucket with the Gladiator helmet on it, and you can take it off. It's a really cool bucket. Try to get it at your theater if your theater has one. They're really cool. And, even though this movie and the first one are familiar in some spaces and borrow, some lines, some plot lines, it still has its own original ideas and twists that further its own story, which I really did enjoy. I do want to get this next topic out of the way because I'll probably get comments on it, and I've seen other people talk about it, and, it doesn't have the strongest script. And yes, I can admit that it's weak in that area, a little weak in that area, in my opinion. But are we really going to a Gladiator movie for a script? Absolutely not. At least I'm not. I'm not going to a Gladiator movie for an amazing script. And you can't fault Ridley for that. He did not write this movie. I mean, the first Gladiator script was, of course, better. And I'm not trying to compare them too much, but it is a better script. It was nominated for an Oscar, of course, for that. But I wouldn't say that script is fantastic. As someone who, adores the first Gladiator, I really wouldn't say it's that fantastic. Why I love that movie is kind of the characters, the acting, some of the lines there, the action sequences. I think both of these movies build a simple plot, simple revenge story, but they expand on it and get so good because they have so many memorable scenes and lines. I can say that both of the scripts are, good in my opinion, the second one being weaker, but they are just become so memorable because of the action sequences and some very memorable lines. So it is a weak script, but I didn't go into a Gladiator movie expecting a masterpiece of a script. What we are going to the Gladiator movies for is the action and characters. So first, let's talk about the action sequences, and there are a lot of them, more than I was expecting. I think there's like 5 or 6 action sequences total. I couldn't focus. I tried to count in my head, but I just got fully, into the movie on this one. And it opens up with its own action sequences, action sequence that is so entertaining. It's like a half sea battle, half land battle. Pedro Pascal and Paul Mescal. It felt so grand scale, and I wanted it to go on for longer. It was a pretty long fight, but it didn't go on for as long as I wanted it to. The budget would have been so much higher. The budget's already really high, but it would have been so much higher if they kept going on for this one, because this action sequence was probably the most expensive one to shoot. You also get some one-on-one with some characters in this that I won't spoil, but they're really well choreographed fights. And of course, you get, Coliseum battles. I think you get like 3 or 4 Coliseum battles here, and those scenes, sequences blew my mind to how great they were. I loved how Ridley Scott really wanted to get much darker with this one, because comparing that action sequence, these action Coliseum sequences, to the first one, I think they are increasingly darker as the movie goes on. And the gore was leveled up for this one. You got limbs being cut off in this movie. In the first one, it's, bloody, a little bloody here and there. I think, Ridley, the first one has an R rating because there is blood and all that. But this one, I think Ridley took full advantage of that R rating and wanted to cut some heads off, cut some limbs off, get some arrows up in there, and he did it. And I'm proud of this man. He really went dark, and I like that he went dark, because when you got swords, you're usually cutting off some limbs, and that's what they did here. I cannot wait to have this movie on physical media just to watch all the fights over and over again. We have like 6 main people to talk about in this cast. I enjoyed all of them, but I do have some favorites, so we're going to go favorite to least favorite. First up, like everyone else says, Denzel Washington stole the show for me. He's my favorite performance as Macronus. He really just commands this movie. Is that surprising? No, he commands literally every single movie that he's on. If he's in a movie for like 5 minutes, I think that's probably going to be your favorite scene in a movie. In this movie, he's actually in it a lot. He's a big main player. He's pretty much the villain, and I don't think that's a spoiler because I think you saw that in the trailer, but he's the villain of this movie. He's basically commanding the gladiators, getting Paul into the Colosseum to be his gladiator. He just has so much aura, man. It is so entertaining to watch him and just lead the screen. He has a couple funny moments too, which I wasn't expecting, but he has this way of plodding along while the movie goes along, and you don't truly notice it until, his plot has thickened and he really is taking everything for his control, and it really is entertaining while he does it. And I'm going to say it. I think that this man is going to get an Oscar nomination for this movie for supporting actor. If he doesn't, I'll be really disappointed. I thought he's really entertaining here, and I think that he is one of my favorite supporting performances of the year. Next up, we have Paul Mescal as Lucius, another great performance. He stood out a lot for me. Maybe it's because I was going in for low expectations for him. He's a fantastic actor. Normal People, After Sun, which I didn't like, but I will, of course, rewatch it, see if my opinion changes. A lot of people said he's not as good as Russell Crowe in this movie, and I wasn't expecting a Russell Crowe performance. They're 2 very different characters, even though he is his son in the movie. You're not exactly like your dad. And I really do think that Paul Mescal did a great job in this movie. I don't think he's going to get an Oscar nomination, but if the Oscars were up to me, maybe I'd put him in that 5th slot. Because I know the leading actor nominations aren't that heavy once you get out of like the 3 or 4 range. So maybe I'd put Paul Mescal in there for 5. He really does a great job at fighting here. His training must have been intense, but he has some good sequences to really show his strength and his honor. Let's just say that. Another one of my favorites is Pedro Pascal as Acacius, General Acacius. He's really good in here. Just like Denzel Washington, he commands the screen. Pedro Pascal is just becoming one of my favorite actors working today. Of course, The Last of Us, Mandalorian, a little bit of Mandalorian. He basically only does the voice here. And then he's going to be in Fantastic Four as Reed Richards. I'm very excited for him in that. It's going to be a very different character here. He's kind of like a villainous character, but he does have some heart in there. and he's in one of my favorite action sequences in the whole movie. I'll pair these next two characters together. It's going to be Joseph Quinn and Fred Hechinger as the two emperors in the movie. They are really funny characters. They're kind of twisted up characters, and their backstory is kind of funny too. But they are twisted. They're twisted twins, and they're very different characters, but I will put them in the same category. I did want more of them though. I didn't feel like we had enough of them. Their sequences though are really entertaining and really fun to watch. Connie Nielsen as Lucilla is on my lowest part of my list, honestly, because I didn't feel like she had that much to do. She has some good emotional sequences in here, but it felt like she just was outplayed by a lot of these other characters. I think she's still good, but she just doesn't really have that much to do here. I also want to give huge props to the production design and costume designers of this movie. It's definitely going to get Oscar nominations for that. I was just in love with the production design, costume design. I didn't really notice any big CGI missteps on this one. They built like a lot of the Coliseum, half the Coliseum, I think. Costumes were standing out. They were shining lots of colors there. I thought the costumes looked great. My problem with Wicked, I love Wicked. I love the movie. My problem with it was that its color grading and kind of the lighting of that movie just was a little too distracting for me. This one though has a lot of great cinematography and the lighting was really well done. One of the main struggles on this movie that holds it back from being perfect is the pacing. The pacing was a little bit of an issue for me because it felt really fast in some places, really slow in other places. The first Gladiator is 2 hours and 35 minutes. This new one is like 10 minutes shorter. I wanted those 10 minutes back, maybe even more. And I know Ridley Scott said there wasn't any director's cut. Do I believe him? No, not really, because I think the producers just told him not to say that because he always says that and everyone just wishes for a director's cut. Even though I felt really fed from all those action sequences, I wanted more time with some of these characters like the Emperors and Pedro Pascal's character. I really loved them a lot, thought they had some great sequences. I just didn't feel like they were as fleshed out as they should have been, so I wish we could have got like 10 or 15 minutes more. Overall, Gladiator 2 not only entertained me, but it floored me and I instantly felt transported back into this world. I feel like Ridley Scott is back in his zone and the action was ridiculously cool and much more gory than I thought it would be. The pacing and character development felt a little off, but the performances were all captivating with Paul and Denzel eating their screen time up. I'm going to give Gladiator 2 a strong 9 out of 10. If you did see Gladiator 2 or you plan to go see it, leave your thoughts down below in the comments. If you did enjoy this review, make sure to leave a like. Helps me out a lot, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.